Welcome back to Stationeers, and we've got a few updates to talk about this time. Thank you to everyone who commented on the vending machine. The conclusion, I think, is that the vending machine is utterly terrible at the moment. It may be sort of improved in the future, but it doesn't have enough features yet to really automate it. I would love to be able to do it from one block like that. But I think from the suggestions, it looks like a sort of solution that we might want to try. And it may work for up to one of these machines. I'm not sure if it'll work for multiple because of a different issue that we'll talk about. But that the solution we could try is to send this underground again and have a system of sorters just like this. And those sorters will output, just like these do, into stackers. But we'll separate the stackers from the sorters. I think I'm going to have chutes with sort of, if you like, a buffer, but a dedicated buffer for each ingot type. So we don't get issues like rainbow belts in Factorio where you can end up with not enough chute spaces, and even in a loop you get other kinds of issues. So if we separate those, we'll have a buffer, and if there are any spots used up in that buffer, we know they're going to be just one ingot type. Then we try to control the stackers. So the stackers may well be up here and the sorters will be downstairs. I will do that off camera because I'm not going to do that this episode because we're going to be doing something else this episode, I think. But that's the sort of solution I will try and do. And then the people in comments can actually feel free to comment on that one while I get on with other things, and then we'll build a whole system. I need to move all this downstairs, first of all, to get rid of a lot of the clutter up here, because I want those machines pretty much up here and sort of in a line, sort of one machine there and then maybe one machine here, etc. So there's a couple of problems to comment on, well, for you guys to comment on. First of all, I need to investigate the behavior of the stacker more in detail. For example, if I lock the stacker, I presume that means I'm locking this handle, essentially. I can't actually pull the handle. But I'm wondering if it also stops the input from taking input or from leaving. Ideally, what we want is some kind of system like this. We have it set at 50 at the moment, and we could set that to like 500. It shouldn't really matter that much. Or 0. It depends on the behavior of the stacker, and that's where I'll actually investigate it. So you guys don't have to. We'll just create some kind of test setup where we've got some chutes coming in and just a bin. I can just drop variable number of ingots in and then set this stacker to different things with, you know, electronics and stuff like that. And I'll look at the wiki as well and figure it out. But ideally, we should have chutes coming into our stackers, and our stackers probably be back here somewhere going this way. And each one of them then acts as a store for one particular ore. Over here, and I've taken the machine out now, I think. Oh no, here it is. So over here we know that this is saying this wants 4 iron. So we know that this is, we can rename this to say iron required auto lathe or something, and read that from over near our iron stacker, or really anywhere as long as it's on the same network, and set things to like, in a trivial fashion, we could set the stacker to 4, unlock and pull the handle essentially remotely, or something along those lines. Hopefully we can do that with these. We'll see. But we need to do that and then not have the rest of the ingots spew themselves out of the front. So I don't want it to do 4 and then 4,000 in stacks of 4 or something along those lines. So the other thing I was thinking that we could do to sort that is that we could take this value of 4 to set the wheel, essentially, the stack size. And then maybe we could sense whether I push this button or something along those lines. If we can sense if I push that button, then it should be able to set that to unlock, i.e. the opposite of this button. If this button goes to 1 when I push it, then maybe that can be set to 0 or unlock, essentially, and then all the stuff will come through. The difficulty when we have multiple machines, and this is, thanks to the commenters, I didn't think about this one at all. I was certainly thinking about stackers as an alternative, but not the routing problem. The problem with that is that if we have, like, say, 1 stacker for each ingot, and I have multiple materials over here, and I manage to somehow trigger... I'm stood in a hole. If I manage to trigger it to send 4 Gs of iron, for instance, I refuse to call them grams, 4 Gs of iron this way, which machine does it go to? And how do we know which machine it needs to go to? How do we switch between machines? because this one might require iron, but this one, let's say that we have electronics here, or more likely the hydraulic, the pipe cutter bender thing. That recipe that we select there, unless the machine's off or something, may also require iron. So if we try and figure out where we're supposed to route things to, we can't remotely tell that stacker to send stuff to here. So we've got to have either some kind of separate system, or a system that will just sense all of these automatically, and as long as each of these have a requirement, it'll fulfill them, or something along those lines. And that's what I'm thinking about at the moment. I'm not going to do that this episode. I realize I'm talking a lot over the start of the episode, so I don't want to occupy too much of your time, but that's what I'm thinking about at the moment, if there's any way to do that, and if we can either remotely control a sorter of some kind, and if I press this, it switches the sorters into which one, puts ores out of it or something along those lines. Not quite so sure yet. Could mean a lot of electronics, and I ideally don't want a lot of electronics. I know you guys, after a few episodes of that airlock in season 1, I think most of you were ready for eye-bleeding levels of issues after watching that episode, so I don't want too much. I think the stacker stuff will all fit in one episode, and then leading to one of these machines, that is a single episode, and then trying to route it to multiple machines will have to be a separate episode, just so everyone doesn't get bored, and I'll probably separate them with something else. As you can see, we're sort of recharging, but I need to go and build some more solar panels, which may require me to go and get more gold, I want to say. Do I need that? Solar panels? Not solar control. Solar panels. Solar panel? Kit solar panel. You're in here somewhere. Solar panel, what do you need? Gold. Yes, I'm going to need to go mine. That's fine, because we get to use our furnace system again. Assuming I don't want to run out of power before then. That's slightly annoying, but I can shut off some of the base because we've got this whole issue with the sun. I can't really demonstrate it now because it's not overhead, but it does pass within a few degrees of overhead, so we don't have to worry about the sun too much at the moment. We have to worry about it a bit more later. Anyway, I'm off mining, and then we'll come back and see what we can do about the solar panels. I may have to look at that as well, because there's new features that we can address using electronics. And just as a demonstration, we've got the mining drill, and if I set the flatten mode, if I press R to open it, go to set flatten, and that should be now in flatten mode. So if I then turn it on and try and dig down, you'll see that we're not able to actually dig down, apart from the point that we're on at the moment. Now, I guess the interesting thing here will be, if it lets me do this, what happens if that's not correct? And you'll see the slight changes there. So if I try and walk forwards and it moves me up slightly, now will it reset that height? And we'll end up with very, very slight slopes. Don't know, but it seems to work pretty well for doing its job, so I'm quite happy with that, to be honest. And that will really help with underground bases, of course. I think I found the source of the power drain. Apparently the volume pump is 2 kilowatts? Maybe, I guess, but not as far as I know. That must be the one on the top up there, I assume. Yeah, let's just take a look here. What is going on? Gas mixer, 2 kilowatts. So this cable requires 2.2 kilowatts. I'll tell you, that's the gas mixer. Where's the volume pump? Where's the volume pump that's causing this issue? And of course the thing is super fiddly up here. I don't think there's a volume pump that way. There's the elevator shaft. The only volume pump I can think of is the one next to here. Is that a volume pump? It is. Okay, so does that consume that much power? Let's just turn it off. Yeah, wow. Has that always been the case, or is that a new thing? Let's turn it back on. Can't turn it back on. Am I out of power? Is my base dead? It could be if this thing was drawing 2 kilowatts constantly. I know it was set to 100. Yeah, it looks like my base is dead. We'll have to wait for dawn, it looks like. Okay, never mind. Yeah, maybe that's a new change, in which case I'm not a fan of volume pumps anymore. I guess we can change them to be like 10 litres instead of 100 litres or something to cut that down to a couple of 100 watts, but maybe I'm just misremembering. Maybe they've always been that bad. Anyway, just thought I'd leave you with that. I'm sure someone in the comments will say, hey, you fool, they've always been terrible. Fair enough. So I guess I use pressure regulators if that's the case, because I'm almost certain these only take 100 watts. Anyway, I have to wait for dawn now, because one of the side effects of the terrain being fixed is... Oh, there comes dawn. You probably can't see it on the video, but it is coming. One of the side effects of the terrain being fixed is now it's really hard to see my base. As incredibly hard to see my base. So once I've gone mining and got some more ingots, I think I'm going to actually build a permanent beacon, and then we'll have our handy computer just point the way back to the base. You can build a mobile beacon and you get it, I think you get it to start with. It's probably in here somewhere. There it is, a tracking beacon. You can put a battery on it and stuff like that. That'll do perfectly well for the moment, I think. We'll just put it, I don't know, here. And yeah, the charge is dead. But that will keep it going for quite some time, I think. Are you on? Yeah, you are now. And then hopefully we still have the initial cartridge in here somewhere. E-reader, atmospheric analyzer, ore scanner. Is my original cartridge around? I'm almost sure there's supposed to be one that shows the way home. Is it still in these? Motherboard logic, circuit board. Oh, that's where the logic one was. Let me just turn on my headlamp. That'll make it a bit easier. Oh, here's where I store all the tank connectors. Nothing in there. Construction supplies. Nope, you're all empty. That's a shame. I thought I had that. Maybe I put it in the other locker anyway. Let's see if it's down here. And hopefully those batteries are looking like they're going to recharge. Graph display. No, I've left it around somewhere. I'll sort that out and we'll use that as a beacon instead. Now that it's light though, we should be not too worse off. Okay, so let's look at some solar stuff now. And I'm going to explain this episode. I'll give you a chance to not complain, but give you a chance to discuss in the comments, because you'll probably find a better solution than I will. But what I'm going to be looking for is as approximate and fast as in not using too many chips, that is, a solution to solar tracking now that we have a tilt involved. Now, the tilt, I've sort of seen if I could actually find out the value of it. So I put in, this is obviously our original sensor, I put in a dial and a writer, and the dial is set to 1. The writer writes that to our second sensor, this one. Now it's showing question mark degrees at the moment in horizontal mode. So mode 1 is horizontal mode. But what happens when it's daytime is it reads 8, and it reads constantly 8 all the way through the day. So the only thing I think of is that's the tilt of everything off vertical, i.e. when it's directly overhead, it's, well, in our case, the only thing I think of is, because we don't have any longitude or latitude kind of readings as far as I know, it would have to be just a value of 8 from vertical, I think. That's the only thing I can think that it would be. If anyone knows any different, please do let me know. I'm more than happy to hear it. So if it is 8 degrees from vertical, we're going to redesign how our angles are calculated here. And this is where I get to explain it. Hopefully you get to understand what I'm explaining, because I don't want to immediately rip up all our solar tracking, because we just need it for we just need it for recharging our power now. And then we'll build it all and just verify that everything is working next episode, if I can get the mathematics right. So what we're doing right now is a cheap, fast approximation. What we're basically doing is taking the solar angle, the vertical one, which goes from 0 to 180 in daytime, and we're dividing by 1.8 to get a value between 0 and 100. And this is just tilting the panel all the way over the top and down the other side. That works perfectly fine, and it will continue to work perfectly fine. But because some of you may be on maps like Europa, and I think Europa may have more of a tilt, or the moon will have more of a tilt, one of those two presumably was going to have more of a tilt, because otherwise there'd be no need for this mechanic. But for anyone playing in the future, I want us to create a system that they can use to keep everything working correctly. Now, in my case, I'm going to get a very minor difference by doing this. The more of a difference for me is that we are on a planet further away from the sun. So I'm getting only like 4/5 of what everyone else is on the moon, for example. And Europa, I'm so sorry if you're on Europa, you probably aren't getting much solar at all. That's a very real problem in space exploration. Beyond a certain amount away from the sun, it's hopeless. You just can't get enough solar power. The Martian rovers experience it whenever there's a dust storm. If they don't get enough light to them, just because of the dust in the atmosphere, they'll shut down. And one of them did recently. I don't know if it's Opportunity or not Curiosity, because that's nuclear powered. Spirit or Opportunity, one of those two, I think, shut down recently because of a huge Martian storm. Not sure if that came back in or whether it's still dead. In any case, so that's a very real problem in regular solar exploration. That's why a lot of craft out in space was plutonium powered. So using radioisotope thermal generators, or RTGs, if you know what they are. Things like the Curiosity rover is plutonium powered, if I remember correctly. And that's a real problem on Earth, because there isn't much plutonium really around for that sort of stuff. I think there's a dwindling supply of the stuff. So available for an RTG anyway. So that's a real life problem. So how do we change this to be more like solar tracking? And it's more like solar tracking on Earth, to be honest. You know, we have an axial tilt of 23.4 degrees, and also in addition to that, depending on where you are on the planet, will depend on what arc the sun takes across the sky as you see it, you know? And of course you have seasonal variations and that kind of thing. That's one of those very real problems. How do we solve that then? So we solve it, I think, by dealing with the two axes separately. We've got to stop just going over the top, I think, and go between zero. Let's assume that zero is pointing, well, in this case, it's 15 degrees off vertical, but let's ignore that for the argument's sake, and just say it is zero pointing directly at the horizon. Instead of going from 0 to 100%, we need to go from 0 to 50%. Why? Well, because this is going to be rotating the other direction as well. Now, in Stationeers so far, at least I've never seen anyone use the rotational axis of solar panels. There's been no need to. So mine, if I just take a look at, just grab my tool down here, it's set to, that's showing vertical at the moment. I think it's set to -90. Yeah, -90. That's what they're all set to. That's just the orientation because of where my data and cables were. Yours will be different. So that's something that you do have to take into consideration. But it's not going to be, let's say it goes between 0 and 50 now, and this is sweeping this way. It's not going to be a smooth sweep like we have right now. Because as soon as this thing starts turning, it's going to be let's say the sun's over here. If I start turning to my right, it's going to be pointing more and more away from the sun. So for the most part, I will be not turning. And then as I shift upwards, I'll be turning to 50 degrees in what is, well, not 50 degrees, sorry. I'll be turning to my right 90 degrees in what will be a very sort of fast action when I'm here. But down here, not so much. So it can't be just a smooth increment as the day goes past. So that's where we're probably going to have to use those trig functions that are now available. And we can probably go and borrow real-life mathematics for how solar tracking is done. So this is going to sweep across relatively fast, but also, because this is going to be 0 for quite a bit of the time, until it's very, very close to noon anyway, these will begin sweeping upwards. And once they are going to get to a certain value, they're going to have to stop. And the maximum value is going to be So let's say 90 degrees is straight up now, for argument's sake. It's going to be 90 degrees minus that 8 degrees. And when that happens, all these panels have to be pointing that way. So they'll be pointing directly at the sun. And then as they rotate down again, they're going to head back towards 0 as far as the vertical angle these are concerned. From 50, which is, sorry, I shouldn't say degrees there. It's going from essentially not 50%, but whatever the percentage value that equals 8 degrees off vertical is. We'll just do a quick calculation for that. That's not the complicated part. But it'll be that inclined angle back down to 0% as these tilt the other way. And then, of course, we're going to have to start going back around the other way. So what we'll end up with some maths that will probably do the same thing that these do at nighttime. At nighttime, they point at that horizon and they come back over the top. In this case, what we'll probably end up with the maths is they'll probably do the same thing as the daytime, except just in reverse, so that they will come back upwards, but then they'll rotate, I assume, back on themselves, so back around this way, if we set them to rotate that way. So hopefully that's clear. I know it's probably not, because it's one of those things that's going to be tricky. So let me just quickly explain that again. So we're going to be going essentially between 0, if that's a horizon, and 82 degrees for my case, because it says 8 there. But we won't hard code that. We'll probably just read the value from that sensor in, just so that the same circuitry will work on your world. So we'll go between 0 and, in my case, 82 degrees, and then back to 0. And we'll transform that into a percent. At the same time, we'll figure out, trig probably, you know when your maths teacher says, you'll use this in your life, and you're like, no, I will never use this, until you find a game like Stationeers. So we'll do the same thing to figure out how much we need to rotate this by as the sun goes overhead. And it will be very quickly to turn when we get close to noon. Because until then, the angle that the sun goes, it won't be much different from, again, the angle that it appears at sunrise. Its maximum deflection is when it's right overhead from the overhead vector, if you think about it that way. So I'm going to have to flip it around quite rapidly towards noon, and then go back towards sunset. All right, got that? Good. Hopefully that sets the scene for the challenge. Now, I'm going to just maybe I should just commit now and saying I'll figure out my own math and we'll see whose works best. Probably your guys, but ideally, I mean, I'm sure we can come up with the actual solar tracking used on Earth. That's probably the best solution overall anyway, but that will probably use a wall of math that we ideally don't want. So if there's any shortcuts, happy to hear it. And I guess the easiest shortcut is just to ignore it, at least if you're on Mars. If you're on one of the other planets, if there is a more tilt, then you're not going to be able to ignore it. I'm sorry. We'll have to solve it somehow. Well, you can ignore it, but you just have to add so many more solar panels that becomes a problem. And if Europe is tilted, with the reduction in wattage, you may have a problem. However, and this is just a thought, remember that there's that new turbine generator? Now, I haven't found it yet. I need to go and see if I can find it. I wonder if it's in the gas fuel generator options. Let's just quickly take a look, because if it's not in there, I can't find it. Let's just see. Do we have it in here? It's not in there. Let's see if there's a gas fuel generator in here anyway. Portable generator, gas fuel generator. What do you need to actually make? Iron and copper. I've got both of those. I'll just make one anyway. Okay, while that's going, we'll just leave that to run. So the turbine generator generates power when you pass atmosphere through it. Now on Mars, that's terrible. There's probably nothing I can do with this unless I design a loop. That's the only thing I can think of. But if I design a loop, it seems like it shouldn't be possible, because if this thing generates more power than I'm using to basically store and loop atmosphere between two different tanks or something along those lines, and then I design some kind of switch or loop to send the atmosphere back again between two tanks, it seems like I'm getting essentially perpetual motion, and that shouldn't really be doable. However, who knows? But yeah, so we pass, essentially it's a turbine, so we pass air through it, and presumably the more air, it says 1 atmosphere is like maximum per tick, then we'll get 90 watts of power out of it per tick. Yeah, let's not have the whole watts argument again. So on Europa has an actual heavy atmosphere. Now, Europa in real life does not have a heavy atmosphere. It has to be said, it is something really small. I think it's something like a few micropascals. So that's not millipascals, that's micropascals, 10 to the minus 6. So you may as well just say it's vacuum. That, you know, its atmosphere is like the moon, I imagine. It's very, very, very small. But it's a game, so they've got to actually, you know, vary the scenarios somewhat. So it's oxygen atmosphere, and that's oxygen is the real atmosphere on Europa, but it's just not very much of it. However, in Europa, that's at 78 kilopascals. Yeah, so it's basically like I assume like high mountain sort of altitudes on Earth. And that means if you've got essentially an infinite supply of oxygen at high pressure, what you may be able to design is you don't need essentially a large tank then, you just need the ability to transfer that that quickly. Now that may be why, and that's a good thought actually, is that why the volume pumps changed? Because if they didn't change it, and I set this to 100 litres, I'd be able to pump atmosphere like you wouldn't believe through this thing. So maybe that's why that's been changed. Stealth nerve. So, is there any way to get perpetual motion out of such a thing? And what would give us all that pressure? It's a question for next episode, I think. Or maybe the one after. I do want to try a few different generators. I've got the solid one. I've taken that up because I don't want to use it anymore. There is a gas fuel one, which has that finished making now? Yes. And that's not a scroll wheel option. For the turbine generator, that is. So it's possible they forgot to add it to the crafting list, or that I'm still blind. So if anyone sees where that is, do let me know. Because I do want to have a play around with it just to see what we can do with it. I know we can do with a gas fuel generator. I have people continuing to say, can you use that to basically power from the output of your furnace? Yes, you very much can. Well, not for the output of the furnace, but the output of that tank up there, that's our furnace mix. Yep, we can. It's just very expensive to do so in terms of resources. For example, it needs oxygen and hydrogen. I'm not going out that much to go and collect a lot of those. So yeah, it's possible. But the idea of just using gas to go through the turbine, hopefully there's an output on it. Because if there's an output, we won't lose any gas. And I'm much more in favor of doing that kind of system than I am using up gas. So we'd have to deal with the difference in pressure. So maybe we'd have to have a vacuum on one side and an atmosphere on the other. Don't know. We'll see. Once I can actually find a way to build the thing. In any case, I think I'll leave the episode there. We will catch up next episode with improved solar tracking. I know this has been a bit of miscellaneous ramblings episode, but we'll get back to actually building full solutions next time. But it'll be helpful if the wiki gets updated. We can take a look just to double check what that daylight sensor is. And from there we can build a full system, hopefully as described in this episode. So, hopefully you've liked that one. Feel free to like, subscribe, share as normal. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you've got any questions or if you have an alternative solution. And next episode we'll work on building it. As always guys, thanks for watching.